Welcome to the Eddie Donan Show. Guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot to me. I've had a lot of support, a lot of feedback on the previous episodes. And this one, I'm super excited because I have a powerhouse team here with me and we're going to have a lot of fun. I have the team of OWS Law, Obaidul, Zahid, and Sajid. They are a real estate legal firm and litigation lawyers. And we're going to be breaking down a lot of your real estate related questions and also litigation questions because not everything goes right. Guys, how are you doing?
Great. Well, thank you for having us here.
Awesome.
Oh, we're very, happy to be here with you guys. And
it's exciting to be here today.
Thank you for coming. I know you guys are busy, have a busy schedule, and it means a lot to me that you're here, and hopefully we can provide some good content for the viewers out there.
Absolutely.
So tell us about your firm. Tell us a little bit. I gave you a brief introduction, but give me the elevator pitch.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure if it's going to be an elevator pitch, but we are a boutique law firm.
Okay.
4 of us do real estate transactions, commercial and residential, and some corporate structuring. 3 of us are involved in litigation as well. A lot of our litigation work is in the area of real estate, development, contracts, shareholder disputes. Yeah, so there is a fair, healthy range of work that we do.
Right.
And we have a lawyer who is very good at doing family litigation, divorces, and matrimonial disputes, and another lawyer who does refugee and immigration practice.
Right.
So we say that we're growing. We're
Good.
trying to cater to the needs of the growing community.
Right. So you have all areas pretty much covered.
We have a few, yes.
That's good. And growing.
We
And
are.
growing.
That's
Yes.
good. So how long have you been in the field, Obaidul? And ask you all of you guys the same question when he answers it. How long have you been doing this?
This is my 8th year of practice.
Okay.
I've been doing litigation all along.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and this has been my 4th. Came onto the firm, met Obaidul,
Okay.
and it's just been, we've been kicking it since.
Technically, it would be my 13, but that would be a bit misleading because about 10 of those 3 years were not in this jurisdiction. It was in Bangladesh. And then after I came here, I've been doing this for a year about.
The question that always comes up to me, at least, I'm going to flip it back to you guys. How did you decide to get into law? Like, did you want to be a lawyer, like, since you were a little boy? All of you guys, or did it just happen? I guess this doesn't just happen, but like, how did you decide to be where you are right now?
It's a very interesting question, actually. I don't know. I went to law school believing that I wanted to become a lawyer.
Okay.
By the end of it, 4 years of school, however, I was not so convinced.
I think that's how it usually goes. You go through law school and you're like, do I still want to do this? I don't know. And then you're kind of like chosen your path. And you're like, okay.
Well, you've already invested a lot of time.
Invested,
You're committed.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of time, money, energy.
Yeah.
I am, and I am very motivated to do what I do, though. The practice of law gives you a kind of fulfillment.
Right.
That is sort of rare, and I'm sure there is fulfillment in every area of work.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But a lot of what we do directly touches the lives of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very fulfilling. We love litigation because that's a direct way of helping the lives of a family if it's a real estate practice. So yeah, I love what I do.
Yeah. And how about you, Sajid? You're quite young, but you were actually in the field prior to this, right? By field, I mean real estate field for you guys watching.
Oh yeah, I was a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Prior to becoming a lawyer. So it's kind of an easy transition.
Yeah.
In the sense that I already knew a lot of the stuff that was happening in the real estate market. My father's a real estate agent for 24, 25 years now.
Right.
Almost a little bit longer than you, right? So
a little bit.
Just a little bit.
But
But no, it's just real estate runs in the family, right?
That's
It's
cool.
just something that I grew up with understanding. And now I do real estate litigation and I close transactions.
That's
So,
good.
Yeah.
So did you always want to be a lawyer? Like growing up, is that something that you...
Growing up, yes, I did.
Yeah?
I did want to
Okay,
help
yeah.
people, and I think that was the goal, is helping others, helping my community, and representing my community as
Good.
well, right? So it was something that I always wanted to do.
Good.
Absolutely.
And how about you, Sajid? Is that something you always had?
It was illegal shows, man.
Oh, yeah?
The desire to become the Alan Shores and the Denny Crins and Harvey Specters of the world. It was that. But yeah, there is, since I said that, I feel obliged to mention that there is a lot of difference between that world and the actual legal world.
Yeah. I can imagine. We only see the fun part, but there's a lot a lot going in the back end.
Yeah, a lot less glamour.
Yeah.
Sure.
We get that question a lot. It's like, is your life like Harvey Specter and Seuss? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, it's completely different.
Hey, but we want to believe it is, okay? You guys are like our heroes. We want to believe it is. It's fun. When I call, I want to imagine that you're in the middle of a courtroom and you picked up that phone call and you're like...
Probably him.
Well, I'll get into that later. I want to talk about litigation and what I find unique about your firm. What I like about your firm is that not only can I send a client to you and close the real estate deal, right? But if things go wrong, you can help them out as well. And I find that a lot of firms don't offer the litigation aspect, or they might not have experience litigating, because I'm guessing it's something very, very specific. And sometimes what I find in our field is that even the lawyers that are closing a transaction, they have very little practical knowledge as to what would happen if, for example, it doesn't close or it goes wrong, right? And I like to have in my team people that can look at those scenarios as well, because with the market these days, things are happening. So you guys know.
Yeah, absolutely. We focus on litigation first. And then from litigation, we incorporate real estate transactions and closings and stuff, right? But we wanted to get an understanding of how to better represent buyers, sellers, mortgagees, mortgagors, right? Have an understanding of that realm.
Right.
And then that transitions to what we do now, which is closings, right? Because now you're able to identify problems, right? And solve those problems and provide solutions to clients, right?
For those that are very green to the real estate world, because I have followers that are looking to buy, newcomers, so their process might be a little bit different in their countries than here. What essentially is your role in the real estate transaction? So let's say I found them a property, I sold them a property, send you the paperwork. In short, what do you guys do to close the deal?
In short, what we first do is probably hop on a call with your clients to make sure that these are the purchasers that are actually purchasing a home, or these are the sellers that are actually selling a home, right? We always do our preliminary, introduction and stuff.
Right.
The clients that we get are from reputable realtors like yourself, that we would hope they'll do some of the vetting initially, just to, vet who these clients are these legitimate clients or whatnot, legitimate people, right? As you're aware, there's a lot of fraud happening in the real estate industry.
We're going to get into that.
Yes. So that's what we do first. Initial introduction, introduce ourselves. But I think where our service, where we kind of differentiate ourselves, is that we pick up our phone calls and we're very responsive. Right? We want to make sure if someone's calling me, it's probably because you're stressed, or probably because you need the answer to something, right? Just don't call me at 12 o'clock at night or 7 in the morning, but anytime we're there for you. So,
no, for sure, dude. I can vouch for that. Like, I personally use Sahid's services, and so I have my clients, and he's been very accessible, provide great service. And that's hard to find. So I congratulate you guys for that.
Thank you.
You touched on something that I was going to get into next, and let's just jump right into it. The media right now, there's been a lot of attention on the fraudulent sales. And the comments that I get on my videos are like, how on earth can this happen? So as a real estate professional, I'm going to give you some background as to what I do. So for example, Obaidul calls me to sell his property, and I might not know him from before, right? Obviously, I'm going to get his full name. I'm going to get his address. And I will match the address to the ownership that appears on Geo Warehouse, which, as you guys are aware, it's a tool that says who owns the property in Ontario, Canada-wide. Then we go to the face-to-face meeting in which I'm asking questions. And eventually, if we decide to work together, if he decides to give me the listing, I'm going to ID him for FinTrack purposes. But now I'm not trained to verify if that's a good ID or a fake ID. And I'm guessing that these groups of people that have, I guess that now they've defrauded 30 people so far in the last year, I'm guessing the IDs they produce are quite good. So on my end, as long as I see an ID, the ID matches the person who I'm supposed to be meeting, that person is supposed to be the owner on title, there's nothing else that I could do at that point. And that's how they get through phase one, which essentially is the realtor. And we can complete the whole transaction. If there's no red flags, I have no reason to believe that they're not the owner. But the question now goes to you guys on the legal and whoever wants to take it. What steps do you guys take to ensure that that doesn't happen? Or in this case, how was something like this missed?
We are the last line of defense. Basically, and title insurance companies, we have seminars and whatnot with them as well in how they train us how to identify fraudulent buyers or sellers or whatever, right? it's just asking the questions, is being diligent, right? Don't take everything face value.
Yeah.
You don't be afraid to dig deeper, right? If something feels off, most likely then not it probably is off. So
100%.
trust your instincts, right? And like I said, as the last line of defense, it is really up to us to figure out, if these are legitimate buyers, legitimate sellers, and whatnot. So similar to what you're saying, ID verification, we just have to do it 10 times more. Now we don't particularly have the infrastructure, but that's what requires us lawyers to really dig deep and do whatever we can.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you just can't, unfortunately, there's situations where you can do the best you can, and maybe these situations that occurred on the market, lawyers did do their due diligence, and so did the realtors.
I just find that we're only human. Like if I get a piece of ID that looks legitimate, 2 pieces of ID that match, and I get no red flags from you guys are at the house, living at the house, because that's how they scam these people. I have no reason to believe otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that if, now they're trying to pin it on the real estate companies or the lawyers, there should be some sort of way or tools that they can give us to verify, okay, this is what this person looks like. I think the police force have that. If I give a fake ID to a cop, they'll know right away. They can run it on their system.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have that. I'm assuming that's something that you guys don't have on your end either, right?
No.
And that's how this happens.
We don't. But there's always mechanisms, right?
Of course.
So if a fraudulent conveyance does occur, there are remedies. And I know Obado could speak to that on the remedies that are available for people that were defrauded.
Okay, so the biggest story, the one that broke everything, was that couple that was away, and I think they were away for an extended period of time, and somebody impersonated them, sold it pretty much right under their feet, and now they're back, and they find a buyer happily living there with their family. This happened back in February. Okay, so obviously they're upset. They lost money, and you said remedies. What would happen? I know it's only speculation at this point, but based on your experience, I'm sure you've seen it before. What happens to this family? As the seller and as the buyers who also made no real fraud, right? They innocently bought a house at the peak of the market, might I add, paid top dollar for it, and they moved into this place now. So here we are. What happens then?
Yeah, it's a bit of a fluid situation, really. And it's very unfortunate for everybody. Touching on your previous question, in the course of, a client comes to us, let's say a purchaser or a vendor,
right?
Let's say, whoever that is, to a lawyer. You sort of begin interacting with the other stakeholders in the business, the real estate agent. Maybe there is a mortgage broker,
right?
Maybe there is a bank involved, and maybe the vendor has an agent, etc. A lot of times, these communications can be very helpful for a lawyer to be involved in them, for the client to take an interest in them, and of course, we are there all the time to answer every question that the client has, including from understanding the agreement to purchase, say, looking at title and everything. Let's say we come to this situation in your example, these fraudsters, whoever they are, they ended up, impersonating these people who were away. What do? For the vendor, this is a very distressful situation because first of all, they had no clue. Second of all, they feel immediately that, I've been defrauded. And the result of that fraud is that, first of all, I didn't probably want to sell this property right now. And B, probably, I could have there was some equity that I have lost. They do have remedies, though.
Mm-hmm.
The remedy is that a lot of people carry insurance. For example, the lawyer carries insurance. There is title insurance that they have. And then there is also the Fraudulent Conveyances Act, which allows us to sort of go to court and question that there is a fraud has sort of permeated the transfer. And then the court is able to give the remedy that it deems fit. You pointed out very correctly, however, that in this very example, the purchasers themselves appear to be innocent.
Victims as well, right?
Yes, as well.
They're dragged into this.
Right. As well as probably the real estate agents. They also didn't have any idea about what was going on. So the court then is in a very difficult situation because they would have to then say, well, they look at the convenience of who is going to be more inconvenienced, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this very loosely. They would have to say, what kind of fraud is involved in it, who is involved in it, what kind of evidence do we have, And then in law, in real estate transactions, we often refer to something that we call specific performance.
Right.
You have an agreement, it can be breached by either party. One side is on the right, the other is on the wrong. But then you have to then ask an additional question. Okay, let's say that the vendor, there is fraud. Let's say the vendor was not involved in this transaction at all. But to side in favor of the vendor, you then would have to say, well, what do I do with this innocent purchaser stuff?
Correct.
So there comes the idea of specific performance, when the parties would have to leave evidence as to how this particular property is more unique for the purchaser,
of course,
or for the vendor. So that's kind of a filter that the court uses. But rest assured, for the purchasers and the vendor, as long as they are doing their due diligence, and then lawyers are not full and their real estate agents are doing what they ought to be, it's not that they're out of luck. There are remedies available in law.
Well, by the way, it begs to ask the question, what if any of these parties, I know for the purchaser, it's almost mandatory title insurance now, right? But how about if the vendor did not have title insurance? You know, they were mortgage free and they've owned this property hypothetically for many years. Like, is that a possibility for them not having title insurance?
Well, I mean, they have to. I suppose their claim would be more so at the lawyer, I suppose, or whoever is at fault. Let's say if it turns out that it's an agent, I'm assuming. Well, I know for a fact that the lawyer would always carry insurance, right? So
we carry insurance as well.
Right. So that would be the easy remedy for the vendor, in my view.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting how this all can happen. But once you find out about these things and then you actually look at the process, it's very possible. Like this is, I think, about 30 homes, like I said before. And it's happened before. You hear it all the time, right? And now you're just getting a lot more media attention into it, which is why we're here. And it's a good topic to discuss. But that being said, it's good that you guys give us comfort that there is a solution. As inconvenient as people may be, there is something that can be done. And you're right, at this point, who's right? They're both, in my opinion, they're both victims, because I know what it's like to be purchasing a home back in February when the market was so hot. There was probably a bidding war for this property. And you feel like, oh my God, I won. And now look at you 6 months later, you're going to have to probably leave. So in this case, would you think that the sale will be reverted? So title will be given back to the previous owner. Is that something that is probable?
It's possible. It would be very difficult to answer that question with any certainty, obviously, because you would sort of have to look at the totality of the evidence that would be presented. But perhaps it would probably boil down to how unique is the property to the purchasers. If the vendors in that particular example that we started off discussing, they've been away. It may be that they've been away for 2 years, 3 years. Maybe they don't need this property really. It doesn't have any intrinsic value other than it being a property. We don't know, but the court will have to make a difficult decision. It's not going to be easy on the court either.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now, question would be, from a legal perspective, as lawyers, what can be done as a homeowner watching this? How can they protect themselves, if anything? What can you guys tell them?
Zahid, what can homeowners do to protect themselves?
It feels like an epidemic right now, right? Maybe it's even blown out of proportion, but now you're hearing all these cases that are coming up, and it's happening here in the GTA. So, what would you tell somebody watching? What are you doing to protect yourself?
What would I do to protect myself from someone taking my property? Maybe not go on a vacation for 2 years. I don't know.
That works. Yeah. No, I think they had it. If I'm not mistaken, they had it rented out. I think it was a tenant was involved into this. There's something like that happened. I think it was something a little more.
I think you touched on it. When this occurred, it was in February, right?
Yeah.
So market was scorching hot.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to due diligence, right? From everybody, right? You just need to make sure that nothing falls between the cracks, right?
Correct.
When in the scorching market that we're talking about last year, what a lot of people wanted to do was just get files out the door.
Yep.
Purchaser, the realtors, whatever, they just want to get things done, right?
Efficiency.
That's it, right? And that's when problems occur. That's when you see these fraudulent conveyances happen, when due diligence is not done, right?
Yep.
So as a homeowner, what can you do to protect yourselves? I don't know. That's a very interesting question.
I'll chime in. What they told us many years ago, but I don't remember who said this. It must have been a seminar or course. it said it's never have your property paid off completely. Always have like a line of credit or a mortgage attached to it, because I don't know if that's makes it easier for fraudsters when it's mortgage free for them to do this. But if there's a bank involved, apparently it's harder. You guys might
I think there is some
dismiss
sense in
that
it,
truth
though.
or not.
I think there is some sense in it, yes.
Right.
What it is that now you have somebody who has interest in the property,
Correct.
which is the bank, because the bank there's a charge in favor of the bank. And so whoever is transferring, they would have to involve the bank. Without doing that, they won't be able to complete the transaction. The other thing that comes to my mind is when we do our title searches and send the requisitions and everything, this sort of things to the other lawyer, the vendor's lawyer, sometimes there would be things like an easement, let's say. Like Bell has an easement or a covenant registered on the property, and you sort of shoot a series of questions to the vendor's lawyer. And in that process, the vendor's solicitor is now alerted that he has to now find the vendor and ask these questions. Hey, do you know anything about it? That could be. So there are these opportunities, perhaps.
Yep.
We all collectively need to be vigilant because, as you pointed out, we're just professionals. It doesn't mean that I represent the RCMP or I have the access to the kind of tools the law enforcement does. We don't, basically.
And touching on that, even I like the point that you brought up. Some people did suggest that keeping a lien or a mortgage. From a real estate transaction standpoint, if I'm requesting for a payout statement or something from the bank, I'm getting the person's name, XYZ, payout statement. But what the bank did to verify them and everything, I'm not privy to that.
Correct.
All right. So once again, if you get fake documents and it shows the name and your statement, it matches. To me, it matches. Right. What due diligence can I do to make sure, like in terms of the bank, like am I going to ask them for more information? Like you can only do so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think if these things continue to happen, or more light or more spotlight is put on the matter, I think you're going to start seeing changes because there's only so much you can do.
Very happy to tell you, though, there is a project that Zahid is involved in. It's kind of a software that we're developing, and Zahid has been instrumental in developing it. It probably will take us a long time.
Yeah.
But what it does is that it provides us an interface with the client. And in the back end, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find an interaction point with the real estate agents, the mortgage brokers, and the banks. Ultimately, if we can develop it to the extent that we want to develop it, it might take a number of years.
Right.
But if we could do that, then what we would do is, as soon as the client come in, the potential purchaser or the vendor, we will put their information into the system, and that system is already synced with the bank.
Right. Well,
so that gives us, if that can be implemented, actually, the bank cooperates with us. I think there are significant privacy issues that we need to navigate, but that would be actually a line of defense.
Mm-hmm. There is technology that confirms identification and everything, right? That the banks use.
Well, like even nightclubs. I remember back in the day, like, you provide a fake ID and you're sweating, right? If they're going to scan him or swipe him or not. But I'm surprised we don't have that. But a bouncer has that outside of a nightclub. So it's,
maybe we should have some of these bouncers too.
It's interesting. It's funny, right? But I wanted to switch topics a little bit, right? Because you guys are in court day in and day out. So I think you're the right people to ask. Like the most common question that I have, really, and it's happening a lot specifically with the market shift that we're having, is I'm a purchaser. I bought a property, let's say 2 months ago, gave a deposit. Now I'm firm. There's no more conditions. I don't want to close on this property. Okay. I don't want it anymore. The pricing went down. The interest rate is too high. I just got cold feet. So what would you tell me as a buyer? What are my repercussions? What am I looking at?
Well, Sajid, there's a number of these files. Let's hear from him.
Tell me, Sidney.
Well, if a purchaser, prospective purchaser, has already entered into a firm agreement of purchase and sale, then it really becomes tricky if 2 months down the line or 3 months down the line you get cold feet. There could be legitimate reasons why you don't want to go through with the purchase. Right. For example, there's something in the property that you didn't like or you didn't notice at first, and now you're noticing, and you can work it out with the seller, the vendor. I mean, if there's always a chance, an avenue to have a discussion with the seller, and no one really wants to make things unnecessarily complicated.
Right.
So it is perhaps possible to, have a sort of a mutual release and sort of say that I know this is what I committed to, but I can't. And would you consider it? And the vendor goes, okay, fine, but this is how we part ways.
So essentially, you're agreeing to release. Now, in your experience, how often do you see that from?
So it would be hard to give you statistical, statistically say how often that happens, but it does happen quite a bit.
Oh.
But what I can say that, it happens when, both purchaser and seller, they don't want to complicate things any further because it's in the seller's interest to actually sell the property. If it's put it in the market, then it's in the seller's interest to sell it without any further hiccups. So maybe if the purchaser can successfully appeal to that part, then things work out. Otherwise, what the seller can do is hold on to the deposit and then maybe go through with the sale with another purchaser. And if there is a shortfall, let's say the purchaser promised to buy X and the seller ends up selling it for X minus Z, then that difference, the seller might come off the purchaser for that difference.
Right.
So that has to be, again, done in court.
Right.
That's actually where things get acrimonious.
Because one of the conceptions that everyone in the industry has, with the exception of lawyers, because you guys are actually professionals in litigation and whatnot, but sometimes as a home buyer or as a real estate agent, we feel, okay, if we get the deposit and the house isn't closed, immediately that's going to be released to the seller. And that's not the case. What's the process there? Like, let's say house is supposed to close tomorrow. It doesn't close tomorrow. There's no meeting of the minds. Like you said, there's going to be no mutual release signed. Now the seller they want their deposit and they want obviously damages because now they're inconvenienced and they're probably lost money as well.
Actually, it's quite an interesting comment that you made. It is true, and I agree with you. A lot of times vendors believe that they're automatically entitled to the deposit. And I learned that it's actually not the case. There is no automatic forfeiture because every forfeiture is subject to the court's discretion. Mm-hmm. And there are circumstances where the court will say that, you know what, actually, I'm not going to allow forfeiture. But in any event, if there is no agreement with the purchaser, then there is the need to have a court order. As simple as that. Now, Sajid has made a very good point. The early on we are at this stage of litigation, or hopefully before litigation, our chances of getting to an agreement is actually greater.
Right.
And remember, in these provinces, and I believe that it would be the same case anywhere in the world, don't quote me on the statistics here, but I'm just trying to give you a general idea. Of all the disputes, let's say there are 100 of them, most likely that will solve 95 of them outside the court.
Wow.
And of the litigation, of those 5% that will end up in court, chances are 95% of them will dispose of, again, not by a court order, but by coming to an agreement.
Right.
So it then becomes a question of how do we approach resolution. It always makes sense for both the purchaser and the vendor to not think in a positional way, oh, he's in the wrong.
Right.
We all have to be a little bit practical.
You mind if I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So when we do extensions, and I know the answer to this, but I want Vital to touch on this.
Okay.
Now, when we get an extension, transaction does not close tomorrow. Irrevocable direction to release funds right away. You see that all the time.
Well, that was my next question.
I stole your question. So
I'll explain what that irrevocable direction means. Yeah. So if I'm wrong, if I had a different question. So what that means is this. As a seller, I'm listing my property. So I can request, let me backstep a little bit. Usually the deposit is held by the listing brokerage. So the company that's listed the property will hold to the deposit. That deposit is applied towards the purchase price. So it's going to be given to the seller on completion or applied towards the purchase price. Now, as a homeowner, I can request that my lawyer, instead of my real estate company, holds the deposit. And it can also request that the offers coming in have a clause saying something along the lines that if the property does not close on the specific date, the closing date, then you as a buyer are directing the lawyer to release the deposit to me, the homeowner, right away. So it pretty much skips the step that we were talking about going to court and having to sue for it. Now the question is that enforceable? Is that, what do you do when you see that?
Unfortunately, the person who gave the direction is out of luck, because he has just amended his agreement to purchase and sale by giving him another agreement. He actually essentially said that I understand what the law is. The law says that, it will be subject to the court's scrutiny. But I have just agreed in writing through this direction saying that my deposit is gone to you. So that's an additional agreement. So that's a problem. And this is where I suppose real estate agents can help. And I'm sure real estate agents do help. There is also where lawyers can help. The same real estate lawyer or another lawyer. It's a quick phone call away. Hey, do I sign this?
Yeah.
Because in that moment of desperation, when you're kind of like, oh, I've dreamt of buying this home and I've run into this situation now. Mind you, it's nobody's fault. Nobody intentionally gets into that situation and wants to harm anybody.
Correct.
And so in that moment of desperation, it might seem, oh, I don't have the money today, but I will get the money tomorrow.
Right.
But I don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Right. So let me give him the direction, believing that, I'm not going to lose my money.
That's
right.
That
agreement sort of, seals the deal, unfortunately.
Because I see it in a hot, not anymore so much, but when the market was very, very hot, you would see these clauses. Yeah. And then I had clients wondering, it's like, why is it not the listing brokerage? It always raises a red flag because the buyers kind of expect the listing broker to be holding this deposit. And then we cannot release. As a real estate company, real estate brokers cannot release unless you get lawyer instruction or a court order. Or the transaction's closed. There's no way. So that clause cannot be applied to us. But if it's the seller's lawyer, that's what, and you see it quite a bit. And I'm guessing, to your point, it's good for the seller. It's very good for the seller. It's bad for the buyer because they're basically waiving their right.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, you have 2 points of dispute. Yeah. Point 1 is the deposit, right?
Right.
Point B is the difference between the agreed purchase or sale price and the price that the vendor, who is innocent, ends up selling it at finally. And I'll tell you this, it's actually a different scenario that we're seeing. We're seeing sort of a repetition of what happened in 2017 and 2016. So the deposit has become a smaller problem now.
Right.
Because when the innocent sellers are now trying to put the property in the market, in the span of 3, 4, 5 months that has transpired, unfortunately, they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yep.
So this is a good time for anybody who is getting into the market to be really cautious.
Yes.
And to really make sure that they have the money in their pocket.
Because the liability is bigger now.
So it brings me to this question, and just to put a scenario. So a lot of people watching, I tell clients this, it's very serious if you don't close. And sometimes they believe, no, I will just lose my deposit. They feel there's no other repercussion. So let's go into this hypothetical scenario. I enter a contract to purchase property from you for $1.5 million. Come closing day, I can't close. You agree to an extension a couple times, and then I can't close. I don't have money. I can't get financing, right? And then you go ahead and you call your realtor. You are instructed to resell the property by your lawyer, and now you're selling it, let's say, for $1.2 million. So 1.5, now you can only sell it for 1.2. What do the numbers look like? How bad can it be for the potential buyer? Are they on the hook for the full difference?
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying the liability is much bigger now, right?
Right.
So that deposit that we're talking about is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. That damage is much, much bigger, right?
A point of clarification. I actually went to the Court of Appeal not too long ago. And it might help. You haven't asked the question, but I think it's imbued in that question.
Right.
So there is the $300,000 example difference there. And now let's say the deposit was $100,000.
Right.
So is it $400,000 then? Or is it $300,000 in total? So that went to the Court of Appeal in a case, Azzarello versus Shoke, I believe. And the Court of Appeal clarified that no, the total is really the $300,000 because you've already got the $100,000 deposit and it'll be credited towards that damage. So yes, it's a $300,000. But Zahid is very right though. In the grand scheme of things, and particularly when you're approaching resolution and conversations, when you have the benefit of having the good advice of your real estate agent, consider what may be the practical resolution.
Right.
And thankfully, and I can assure the clients and the audience as well, most of the times we're able to negotiate and we're able to settle.
Okay.
But nobody should bet on that, though. We need to take these obligations quite seriously.
No, of course. Of course. Because you're seeing it quite a bit. Whenever you see a declining market, and people still have, as you said, you mentioned before, they have the intention of closing. But things happen. Financing, interest rates, stress tests. Things can happen in 3 months. A lot of your financial picture can change. And then you're not in a position to be able to close. And that's what it's costing most of these things, right? The market's not what it is. When it's a hot market, the sellers can just resell it. There's not a lot of losses and whatnot. One of the questions that I'm asked often, how long does this process take? So let's say in this scenario, we're not agreeing. There's no mutual release being signed in here. You're going to sue me for the $300,000. How long till things are settled, I guess, in layman's terms? How long will this take? On average, you go to court, you sue each other, and how long till we have an answer?
It can be very long, very, very long, because the courts are, unfortunately, COVID-19 happened. Before COVID-19, we had a lot of litigation in the system anyway. Now, litigation, the courts are just very stressed right now.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands, I don't know the exact number, but the delay is significant.
Wow.
I can give you one small example of the delay. The other day we went to this court basically hands out dates for trial.
Right.
So if you needed a 3-day or if you needed 4 days for trial, then the soonest, and this was in January, the soonest date that you could have is 2025, not even 2024.
Oh, wow.
2025.
So at this point, going back to the deposit, because that's what everyone wonders. So let's say we're 2023 now. So I guess this happened in 2022. So this deposit is in the listing brokerage's hands for this period of 3 years, 4 years?
It often is, actually.
Yeah. Right, wow.
It often is. But although there are other, procedural knives that one could use, something called a summary judgment motion, let's say. And these are often, used in this sort of real estate litigation. Real estate litigation can be complex, but oftentimes they can also be quite routine as well. So you can bring a summary judgment motion and perhaps bring resolution in about a year or so. It's funny you asked today. We received an endorsement from the Court of Appeal in a matter that we argued a couple of years ago. It's not Court of Appeal's fault. There were a number of other steps that happened. Part of the subject matter was actually the deposit. It was a builder. It was a builder who is holding onto the deposit and hasn't yet released it in how many years now? It's been 4 years.
Wow.
It can become complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess another question that always comes up, usually we hear about the buyer backing out. That's common, right? They change their mind, financial situation changes. The most common I hear, they couldn't sell their house, right? So they now have no down payment to go forward with the purchase. But what happens in the event that the seller decides that they don't want to sell the house? So they've entered into that firm APS, agreement of purchase and sale, but on closing or before closing, they call you and they say, hey, listen, I don't want to sell it anymore. Here's your deposit back, or I want to give you the deposit back. What happens in that case? The seller changes their mind.
So that is a little different. It's a bit, how can I say? It becomes a bit challenging for the purchaser to actually make the sale happen. Because let's say a buyer, and let's say you and I have a contract to sell my house, and then like in your example, the 11th hour I say I don't want to sell anymore, and here's your deposit back. So that means I'm basically, I want to put the contract aside.
Correct.
I no longer want to perform the contract.
Correct.
Now, your remedy would be, your interest would be in getting me and forcing me to enforce that contract. So it would be like to force me to sell the house. That aspect, getting that is perhaps called specific performance. So getting that sort of a direction, get that sort of an order from court, asking the seller to do specific performance for a property sometimes can be very challenging, because one of the things that the purchaser needs to establish for specific performance is that the property that I wanted to buy has some intrinsic value to me, or it has a uniqueness, which requires specific performance. It requires the purchaser to delve into and sort of establish that if I did not get this property, then I would be at a loss because I wouldn't find something similar somewhere else. So let's say if it's I'll give an example of one extreme. Let's say I'm trying to buy a condo in a building and there are like 10 other similar condos in the same building, which are empty, which are perhaps available for buying. And if I want an order of specific performance, let's say for condo A, it's very unlikely that I would get it because it's not very unique. There are like 10 other condos just like into the same building and they're available for purchase. If, on the other hand, I'm looking for a house which is located in a specific region or it is adjacent to my house and I have already, let's say, the location of the place and the fact that it's the vicinity of the house, that creates a sense of uniqueness for me. So it's valuable for me and I'm able to establish that. Then specific performance may be obtained.
So essentially, as a buyer, if the property is very unique, I can't just buy it the next month, and the court will more than likely say, like, they can force it. And then again, that would take a period of potentially 3-4, what we've been talking about.
It depends. Sometimes what we would do is rather than bringing a statement of claim, going to trial, what we would do is we'll bring an application. Right. Or as I said, we would use other summary proceedings such as a summary judgment motion, let's say, etc. So it's possible, but it takes time.
It takes time, absolutely. That's why in real estate, as an agent, they tell you never count that commission check until it's closed. Literally anything can happen. You usually think it's going to be the buyer that backs out or no financing, but the seller could do the same thing. And then you're waiting forever. Obaidul, Saeed, it's been an absolute pleasure. There's been a lot of questions that you guys have answered, provided a lot of value. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to say?
Well, thank you very much for having us here. It's a pleasure. We try to help with all questions that the clients have, and of course, anytime you have any questions as a purchaser, as a vendor, reach out to your real estate agent, reach out to your lawyer, communicate.
Absolutely, that's very good advice.
No, honestly, we appreciate the opportunity and getting to speak to you. You're an amazing real estate agent.
Thank you very much.
And everybody that's tuning into the Eddie Donan Show, listen to this guy. He's the man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. But if I do want to, I guess, and it is based on our discussion today, if I do want to leave your listeners with one thing, it's due diligence.
Yep.
Due diligence.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys found a lot of value. I know there's a lot more questions that I'm thinking about right now, but can't keep them here forever. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.